Good evening, I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. Gordon Chang of Forbes.com is here with me. The drama these last days of the exchange of 5 Taliban commanders for an American soldier, Bechtol, points to the efforts of the American government to negotiate with devils. That's what we're talking about when we're looking at the Taliban. The devils are not limited to Afghanistan, Pakistan, to the Ummah. The devils include North Korea, rogue state, a failed state. And there's news that points to a need for the American government to get busy right away. An American citizen, 56 years old, Jeffrey Fowle, has now been detained. His family is reported by CNN within these last days, extremely anxious for his return. Gordon and I welcome our colleague, Bruce Bechtol, the author of a new book, North Korea and Regional Security in the Kim Jong-un Era, a new international security dilemma. Bruce is a professor and for many years has watched North Korea, first with the Defense Department and now as an author. Bruce, I go very closely to this specific case of Mr. Fowle. The Bechtol exchange, there's anxiety at the same time for all American citizens who are in the hands of rogue states. That was true in Iran. It'll be true again whenever American citizens are grabbed, presumably for ransom. Mr. Fowle, does he have good prospects? Is the American government pressing this? What do you know? What can you tell us about how you deal with North Korea? Good evening to you.
Good evening to you, sir, and good evening to you, Gordon. I think that this reflects the paranoia on the North Koreans' part about Christianity and Christians, because the reports that I've seen are that they found a Bible in his room, which may have been nothing more than a Bible he was carrying with him. There's a lot of Christians in the United States. I don't think this gentleman presented a threat, but we saw this with Kenneth Bay as well, another American citizen that was held. And I think it's worth noting that there are a great many grassroots groups in both South Korea and the United States with Korean Americans who are based in the churches. So that's part of the basis for the paranoia on the North Koreans' part about somebody trying to push Christianity. And I think that was what they were doing when they detained this gentleman. But, getting specifically to your question, I think the issue here is going to be, are they going to release him? Well, one of two things is going to have to happen, probably both things. He's going to have to obviously give a fake confession on TV or on radio and in writing, and somebody from the United States, a big name, will probably have to go over there and secure his freedom. So I think that's what we're looking at right now, John.
We have 3 Americans now who are detained in North Korea. Kenneth Bay, as you mentioned, he was certainly a Christian missionary. This guy, Fowle, though, seems to have maybe just left his Bible behind in his hotel room, perhaps inadvertently. The question is North Korea purposefully capturing Americans, or is these just targets of opportunity that presented themselves to the North Korean state?
Well, that's a great question, Gordon, as always. I think that it's more out of paranoia than targets of opportunity. The other American, you mentioned there was 3, he tore up his passport as he walked into North Korea and said he wanted to defect, so that's a whole different kind of thing. But I think it does reflect paranoia on their part, because I think they want the tourist groups to keep coming into North Korea. As nutty as it sounds, they actually are making money off this, and you know how hard up they are for currency right now. But I don't think there's anything the North Koreans are more paranoid about, the government that is, than information. And if they think that people are coming in and trying to use Christianity to cause upheaval in their government, they're going to react in this paranoid fashion.
Should there be a travel ban? Should the United States impose a rule saying that no American can travel to North Korea? Because it seems like they're grabbing Americans left, right, and center. They took that veteran 3-4 months ago, and it just seems like every 3 or 4 months another American is finding himself on the inside of a North Korean jail.
Well, I think, my personal opinion is yes. I think there should be a travel ban to North Korea for exactly the reason you just said. They keep taking these American citizens who are there legally, and so I think that's an issue. There is one way to approach that, and that's what we're doing this evening. We're getting the word out to folks that traveling to North Korea can often be much more of a dangerous concept than one thinks it is when they buy their passport and their tickets to go on these travel groups. So hopefully that'll be something gets more attention because of this most recent incident.
It's attractive to present North Korea as the Three Stooges in North Korea because the elements of farce overwhelm the facts. And we're trying to convey to America right now that North Korea is a murderous regime practicing depredations and what look to be crimes all the time towards its own people and clearly towards American citizens. However, North Korea also is aggressive towards international organizations. I mentioned this, Bruce, because it's within these last days. North Korea threatened a planned UN field office in South Korea set up to investigate human rights abuses in the country, saying anyone involved would be ruthlessly punished. Bruce, I call on your experience. When North Korea makes a threat like that, they mean to carry it out. It's not obvious how they're going to do it, but there doesn't seem to be any limits to what they will do once they feel they're under attack.
Well, you're exactly right, John. And that's the key point here is we don't know how they're going to respond to what they consider a very real threat from that office established in Seoul. But they will respond somehow. It could be cyber warfare. It could be an incident along the DMZ. It could be, taking 2 or 3 South Koreans hostage that just happen to wander a few yards outside of the Kaesong industrial complex. But it will be something because when the North Koreans make a threat, as you said, they generally carry it out.
And this looks to be serious because this is more than just propaganda that they talked about this UN office. They were talking in very severe terms. So it seems to me that clearly, this is something the UN should do, and I applaud the UN for doing it, but they've got to be very careful about their personnel in South Korea because the North Koreans can go into the South and actually do something pretty horrible.
I agree, Gordon. And it's very interesting to me that the North Korean government responded as strongly as they did against, ultimately this office and the UN report that came, a few months ago. In fact, I read a piece today. They actually called the gentleman who led the team in the UN and who testified in Washington and in New York City. They called him a homosexual and said all kinds of negative things about his family. It's just unbelievable that the kinds of things that they said. They are, as I said, very focused on information. And it appears that North Korea has often had allies on the left in various nations who tended to overlook their human rights violations because they wanted to deal with North Korea and perhaps engage them. That appears to be going away. Whether one is on the far right or the far left or in the center, most nation states and most political entities in nation states now truly see North Korea for what it is, and that's a problem for North Korea.
Quickly, Gordon, I understand everybody talks about the weather. No one can do anything about it except Kim Jong-un.
Kim Jong-un actually went to the Meteorological Bureau and criticized those people there for bad weather forecasts. But the thing about this is that Kim Jong-un is a deity. So why does he need weather people? He can just sort of tell us what the weather's going to be tomorrow.
There's a drought, and he was complaining, I'm presuming, to the meteorologists that they weren't delivering rain. Is this typical of him being so petty? Do we regard this as his behavior regularly, or is there something odd about this, Bruce?
Well, I think you made a good point, John, in that he does have very erratic behavior, and I think a lot of that goes to the fact that he has been basically a spoiled, pampered little boy, growing up in a private school in Switzerland, essentially, and then being brought back to North Korea and being told he is the next God King of North Korea, and everything he says goes. And it just goes to show that this guy is even more arrogant and erratic than his father was, who was in his own right a very arrogant and erratic individual and a leader of a nation state.
Bruce Bechtol, whose new book, North Korea and Regional Security in the Kim Jong-un Era, A New International Security Dilemma. I look forward to speaking at length to Bruce about his book. Congratulations. Gordon Chang of Forbes.com. Weathermen beware. I'm John Batchelor.